Hey YouTube, this is part 3 of how to breed your leopard geckos. So basically I'm going to talk about money and breeding. So a lot of people come into the hobby thinking that this is a very profitable business and you're going to make money. Or hobby to do, and you're going to make money back on your animals. I have to say that is false. You will lose a lot of money. I know I've went negative plenty of times. Will you make the money back on your animals that you purchased off of the babies and stuff that you produce? Yes, you will. I can't see that. I think all my leopard geckos are paid off. Yeah, what I paid for them, I think they paid me back, all of them, and some just for food. So it's really a negative thing. I don't really think it's a very profitable business. Unless you're doing it on a really large scale where you're buying in bulk in huge amounts and you're just breeding so many and selling so many. You really have to be pretty big to be making money and doing pretty well. So yeah, this really isn't a profitable thing, and you really can't come into the breeding hobby of leopard geckos thinking that you're going to earn money. So that's a big thing. I just want to say it's bull if you're going to come in here just to make money. It's really hard, and you probably will go negative. So yeah. Another question is, where do your babies go? That's a big question. Now, when I was first doing it, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to be breeding. I'm going to advertise on YouTube. I tried to make a plan. And it worked for that season. I sold everything off of YouTube. It took some time, though. It really did. It took a lot of time, and you're not going to sell a ton of leopard geckos right off of YouTube because a lot of it is just little kids, and you're not going to be able to sell it. A lot of geckos to little kids because they're always going to want the cheapest thing, or they're going to want this, or they're going to want that. And you're like, well, I paid this much money for the parents, and this is what this gecko's worth, and you're not going to be able to sell it to them. Long story short. Or they don't want to pay shipping. Shipping's a big drawback that draws a lot of people back. They're like, oh, I don't really want to pay the shipping of $50 to get the gecko to my house. Well, that's not your problem. So advertising and getting your babies out to homes is a really big thing. It's really hard to find out which method works for you. Facebook is working really well right now, I can say that. I know people who do faunas, classifieds, Craigslist, and you could do pet shops too. Pet shops is another thing. You could contact pet shops, but when you're breeding, you really want to think about where your babies are going to go and what you're going to do with them. So that's basically a big thing, and you kind of want to be a little bit prepared and have some ideas in place. I thought of Craigslist too. I did sell 2 on Craigslist. Yeah, I did sell 2 on Craigslist. So definitely thinking where your babies are going and how you're going to sell your animals is a huge factor that comes into play. Another thing that I wanted to cover that I didn't really cover is your parents, guys, for the younger hobbyists in this, going into the hobby. Basically, you want to have your parents on board with this. It isn't a thing that you want to be like, oh yeah, by the way, Dad, Mom, I'm breeding leopard geckos in my room. Or they come up, what are these things doing in the tank together? Yeah, that idea, guys. So definitely have your parents on board about breeding leopard geckos. I have my parents' full support on me breeding these animals, and it is so great, and I'm super happy to have my parents help me. My mom is great about it. She loves the geckos, and she wasn't so thrilled about them with me personally. She told me these were the one animals that I would never get. Actually, that's a snake. Well, she told me at one point that I would never, ever, ever gonna have a leopard gecko as a pet. Turns out I had over 100, so yeah, that didn't really happen, but now she's on board. Especially with seeing the babies. She just fell in love with the babies, and especially my boy Gamma. Anyway, get your parents on board. Second off, selection of leopard geckos for geckos that you want to pick out to breed. Alright, now here are some key aspects that you want to look at. You want to look at the size of your leopard gecko. You want to think, alright, so basically I want to breed leopard geckos. Am I going to raise up a baby, or am I going to get an adult? Or like, am I gonna just skip the baby phase and just get an adult and just breed adults and purchase adults, or am I gonna pay less money to get a baby and grow it up for 6 months to a year? Depends on how big your baby is, or juvie. So another thing you're going to want is looks, or genetics. Genetics and looks is kind of what I was meaning by looks. You're going to want to pick a really good looking gecko. If you really want to breed breeder stock, definitely get good looking animals, and you want to be able to get good genetics. So that's basically it. Genetics is really the key. I've seen some really doled out animals throw some really bright babies, personally, and I've heard that from other breeders as well. So technically looks doesn't mean everything, but if you really want to get a certain look, like jungle, other different patterns, go for a certain look and try to purchase the animals with your certain look that you want. Interest definitely in the morphs. When a person first starts off breeding, I like to say, they're like, what morph should I get, stuff like that. I say, get your favorite morph. It's not fun if you're not getting your favorite morph. It might be, if it's really, really expensive, you might have to settle for a lower grade morph to start off with and then gradually build up. I've done that with a couple things, actually. So that's definitely worth it, and that's something that's pretty cool. Priorities. What gecko do you really need in your collection at what time, for you guys who have pre-existing collections? That's a huge thing. You want to know, do I really need this gecko if I go and buy it? Do I really need another female? And do I have the space? This is a big question. I'm going to skip over to here. Do I have the room to house the leopard geckos and their babies that I'm breeding? That's a huge question. As you know, I have this rack right here, and I had this rack pre-existing, and I knew I was going to have more females breeding, so I built a second rack just because I knew I was going to have that much more babies, and I did. So, do I have the room? That's a big thing. You got to make sure that you have the room and you are prepared to put more spaces in and get more stuff, because you don't know what you're facing. I filled up both of the baby racks this season, and thank God they were just selling just in the nick of time at the end, because I started hatching out 2, and then I was like really cramped on space, and then I sold 2, and then I got more space, so it worked out for me. But even that, it's like a little bit like scary, because you want to make sure you have the room when you're breeding leopard geckos. So definitely priorities is a big thing with like picking out leopard geckos and how many females you want to breed. When you're picking out geckos, these are some things that I like to look at for health-wise. I like to look at the overall health. Now, basically, I like to look at the eyes. I want to make sure the eyes are kind of clear, the gecko looks good, and stuff like that. I also want to make sure that the tail's pretty fat or decent sized. I don't want to see a really skinny tail, because a skinny tail means that the gecko could have had some eating problems, or it wasn't getting fed enough, and the breeder could be a little bit off or something like that. Or sometimes the breeders literally just have problems with geckos and they have a skinnier tail. And some geckos have really skinny tails and really plump bodies, and sometimes they grow out with their bodies and then they grow out with their tail later. So it's just different things. I've definitely seen the plump bodies and thin tails. It does happen. It's kind of funny, but yeah, but the tail will fatten out as they get with age. So basically, you look for the tail. You look for the eyes a lot. That's a big thing. You also want to make sure that the geckos just looks active and alert and doesn't look like it's drained. If it really looks like it's drained, it's not a good thing. I know I've purchased some babies that looked like they were kind of tired and stuff, but you know, it's understandable. They're at an expo for how long, and they're in deli cups for how long? Probably like a day or two, and they're tired, so they're a little bit stressed out, and that's going to happen at expos and stuff, and there's nothing you can really do about it. But, you know, it depends. Like, you can ask to take it out and stuff like that and see the gecko move around. You don't want to see a really lethargic gecko. You really want to see one that's alert, lively. Some are just mellow and calm and lie down the whole expo. I've seen that. I've had geckos that do that too, so it really depends on the animal, and you just gotta look for plumpness, overall health, and also a big key factor is, can I trust the breeder? Breeders, for getting leopard geckos, you really want to get them from leopard gecko breeders. That way you know the genetics you're getting, and you don't have to worry about random strains and stuff like that. And you want to get good ones. Some good ones that I like is Sasabek, World of Reptiles, Empire Reptiles. I really like them. They're really good. Ohio Gecko, I met him and he's great. He's a great guy. He has some awesome projects. David's Fine Geckos, I got some geckos from him, and actually this bell female, who's a little bit of a slow grower that I showed in the second video, I got him from her. I got her from him. Sorry, gosh, sorry about that, Dave. It's totally my bad. Anyway, he's really good. There's some other good breeders out there. Ron Tremper, of course, Marsha McGinnis, JMG, Gecko Boa, Steve Sykes. There's some other ones. There's some really nice small breeders like myself that I really support. I like supporting small breeders because basically they have basically the same stock as a lot of the breeders do. So I mean, they're getting clean genetics, and their lines actually might be a little bit more varied up than what you think, unless they purchase all from like one big breeder or one breeder in particularly. So small breeders are really good because you're gonna probably get a lower price, and they're there and they kind of know their animals. They know their animals a lot. They might have hatch dates. They might have this. They'll definitely have records, clean, crisp. They'll know exactly what parent it is. So that's why I really like small breeders, and that's why I like staying small myself. I like focusing on key projects. So yeah, that's basically why I like small breeders, and I have supported a couple, and I really don't regret it at all. So yeah, anyway, food. Big misconception, breeding females, I gotta feed it a pinky. No, you don't have to feed it a pinky. That's a total myth. I don't feed any of my geckos pinkies. I think it's stupid. When I first got into it, I heard a lot of pinky feeding, and I don't see it a lot as much anymore, which I think is really good. I think it's mean anyway to feed a live pinky to a leopard gecko. I don't know. I don't like feeding mice and stuff to animals. Though I would actually like to see a Pac-Man frog eat a mouse in real life. But that's another thing. But anyway, I don't like seeing piggies or babies, really babies. I don't like seeing baby animals getting fed off. But I know it's necessary for snakes and stuff, and that's understandable. But for leopard geckos, there's no need. I even heard a story about, I've heard a couple stories about leopard geckos choking on mice and pinkies, and I've even heard one about one dying once, which that was really sad. But one was choking from a breeder that's no longer around, and he had to put it under warm water, and he was like worrying. Took like 10-15 minutes, and the pinky finally came out of the gecko, but he was like terrified, and I don't know. I don't like risking it. Some geckos can just do it fine, but there's really no need for pinkies, guys. I think if you do food like these are some good foods. I really like mealworms. Ron Tremper uses them. In his book, he really puts these up, and a lot of other breeders do as well. Mealworms are probably the best staple diet for a leopard gecko. I really like it a lot. I know other breeders feed superworms. They're good. Sometimes they can bite your leopard geckos, but they won't kill your leopard geckos. So your leopard geckos can eat superworms as well, so they're also good. They have a lot more fat content in them, so they aren't as healthy as the mealworms. So just keep that in mind as well. Butterworms, they're super high in calcium, great for females, so you really don't even need the pinkies. You can just feed butterworms. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can get them in like a container at an expo, and they will do wonders for your leopard geckos. And I even feed them for my sugar gliders because they're so good in calcium, and I want my gliders' bones to be pretty good, so because they jump around all the time. And the leopard geckos as well, you want them to be as healthy as possible. So really, my two favorite things is mealworms and butterworms. I think they're great if you want to do leopard geckos. Feed those too. Crickets, I don't suggest doing at all. I'll wipe that right off. I really don't suggest it. basic reason why I don't suggest it. They're going to jump around in the tank, and they're going to stress out your leopard geckos if they can't catch them, and they're breeding, and they have eggs. It's like a pregnant woman trying to get her food. You're not going to want to stress her out. And the same thing goes with leopard geckos. You're going to want to make it as little as stress as possible. So best thing that I could say is mealworms, superworms, and butterworms. I only feed mealworms here. I have fed superworms, and they do work well, but I prefer mealworms and butterworms, to be quite honest. So, yep, that's my little video on part 3.